one more recent win. I just did that podcast episode about 2 recent wins, one of which was people were opting into my guesting guide, podcast guest speaking guide from podcast interviews I was doing. And 2, people were asking me to send guest speakers to their podcasts, both of which are amazing. But the 3rd big win, which I totally forgot to mention, which I'm so excited about, is I now have an amazing recent interview that I can put on my recent interview list and use it as awesome credibility as I send out my pod pitch guest speaking request emails out to show hosts. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit because I was having some impostor syndrome. I'm going to be real with you. Anyway, listen in.
You know when someone is selling from stage and at the end the audience gets up and rushes to the back of the room to buy? That's a table rush. My name is Misha Z, and the Table Rush Talk Show is all about bringing you the tools, strategies, and tactics that you can use to grow your audience and inspire them to buy.
Yeah, so I've been sending out email requests to speak on podcasts, and I have some attachments that I put on the email. I have a recommended podcast name and a podcast episode name and recommended talking points. I have on there 5 stars for 5-star reviewing the person's podcast, so I can show proof that I did indeed 5-star their podcast. And then I have my recent guest appearances list. So I attach that. Now, I had gone to Funnel Hacking Live back in 2021. I also went in 2022, and I'm going in 2023 here shortly. It's a little over a month away. But in 2021, I had seen Johnny Lee Dumas speak. Lee Dumas has the podcast Entrepreneurs on Fire. He's super successful with that podcast. Like, he crushes with that podcast. He's got millions and millions of downloads. He gets, I don't know how many of hundreds of thousands of downloads a month. People pay to be on his podcast. How crazy is that? Like, people pay to be interviewed by young Johnny Lee Dumas. And then, he teaches people how to start podcasts and has funnels and generates a ton of revenue. And he's probably got ad revenue going on as well. But anyway, he is a podcast master. So I heard him speak, and part of his presentation was on how to invite yourself onto other people's podcasts. And he had a whole email script, and it was awesome. So I worked. That was a foundational piece of the current script that I use, that I created, that's in my voice and that I'm teaching to my students. But it originated from Johnny Lee Dumas, from that 2021 Funnel Hacking Live presentation he gave. And one of the things he has on there is, he says, see my attached recent speaking engagements. And I have some past speaking engagements, not as many as I want. A lot of them were on testimonials, getting your customer testimonials. So they weren't on guest speaking on people's shows. And oh my gosh, I've gotten so much better so quick at guest speaking as well. So that was the other thing. Some of the shows, I didn't have my call to action dialed in, so I would fumble around at the call to action. Misha, where can they find you? And I would be fumbling, bumbling, stumbling. And I got that dialed in now. Oh my gosh. I teach my students how to do that too. And then, my stories weren't as cohesive and poignant, as on point. Like, I know what to say, when to say it now much, 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 much better as I've built out my story bank and obviously started speaking on more and more podcasts. And then the other thing is, some of my best podcast interviews haven't been published yet. So 2 of the ones that I absolutely crushed haven't been published yet. And I don't know when they're going to be published. Like, who knows when the podcast hosts will get around to publishing them. Some podcast and show producers record so many interviews that they have a backlog of publishing. So it could be months, perhaps a year, till a show or your interview gets published. How crazy is that? So I spoke on the Small Business Spotlight, and it hasn't been published yet. And I spoke on that way back in like February or something, 6 months ago, something crazy like that. That thing could have been forgotten about by now. Fortunately, I have a copy of it and I posted it on my YouTube, but it sure would be nice to be able to point to that guy's show. And then I spoke on Ecom X Factor and did really good on that one, and was speaking about influence tours and things like that. And man, it was great, and it's where a lot of stuff was coming together for me. And that one hasn't been published yet, and who knows when that's going to be. Fortunately, I had the audio file as well, but it's hard to point to it when it's hiding out on someone else's hard drive, and so I was like, well, this list isn't as pretty as I want it to be. I had 6 recent interviews on there, and of varying degrees of what I felt like were good. And of course, that's so subjective. Anytime I think something I've done is bad, I get amazing feedback on how good it was. So it's all a mind game, is what I'm trying to say here, right? And so I had this list, and I was thinking, man, should I even reference any of my other speaking engagements, or just avoid the subject altogether? And I thought, heck with it, I'm gonna go with Johnny Lee Dumas's recommendation anyway. And I put together my list, cobbled it together as best I could, and I've been sending it out, and I got accepted onto shows in spite of that, it could feel like, right? And so I did that interview on the Creator's Adventure with Brian McNulty. Oh my God, it was so good. And man, he published it right away. Like, I was interviewed, I don't know, a week ago, and he had that thing up quick, which lets me know that it was good and he liked it. And also that maybe he didn't have a backlog of other episodes, but that people have already clicked through, as I said, and went to my landing page that I told them to go to of my call to action. And then, I was asked to to recommend some other interviewees as a result of my success on that show. So there you go. I now have an amazing recent interview to put on my recent interviews list. I might even just put it directly into the email and just reference it alone. Here's a recent interview. Might just put that on the pod pitch email and save the attachment. So I think that is freaking awesome and amazing. and I'm super excited, and a sliver of my imposter syndrome has melted away. All right, everyone have a good day out there. You got to get your voice out if you want to be heard. If you want to go on a podcast guest speaking tour, download my free guide. Go to guestingguide.com. Go to guestingguide.com, and you can download my podcast guest speaking guide, my guide to help you plan and execute a profitable guest speaking tour. All right, good day.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Table Rush Talk Show. For resources to help you sell your stuff, go to belove.media/resources. That's belove.media/resources. And be sure to subscribe, comment, 5-star, and share. Thank you again for listening.